This wasn't a snub. This wasn't a scheduling conflict. This was an execution in broad daylight, and the blade came down from one of the safest, most loyal hands Meghan Markle ever had. Because when Gayle King shuts the door, she doesn't slam it. She seals it, locks it, and quietly lets the world know you are finished. Behind the soft lighting, the scripted smiles, and the carefully staged television appearance, something far more explosive was happening, something Meghan never expected. The woman who once helped validate her story walked away, permanently. And that decision didn't come from palace pressure. It didn't come from tabloid hysteria. It came from inside the room. Sources say Gayle King has now made a definitive declaration. No more interviews, no more favors, no more credibility lending. Not now. Not ever. And the reason cuts straight to the bone. Meghan, according to those close to the fallout, is controlling, manipulative, and fundamentally dishonest. That's not gossip whispered by aides. That's a verdict delivered by one of the most trusted journalists in America. The interview that was supposed to be a reset, a soft-focused redemption arc promoting Meghan's latest venture, has instead become the final straw. What was sold as a conversation was allegedly a rigid production, micromanaged down to the last blink. Approved questions were sent, then revised again. Entire subjects were walled off like crime scenes, Thomas Markle, the royal family, anything that risked disrupting the carefully curated mythology. This was not journalism, it was an infomercial, and Gayle King saw it. Insiders describe a process so suffocating that editorial independence nearly collapsed. Lighting demands, seating angles, reaction shots. Even promotional clips were expected to be approved by Meghan's team. This wasn't collaboration, it was annexation. And Gayle King does not play puppet. What enraged her most wasn't just the control, it was the pattern. Promises made behind the scenes, assurances about honesty, scope, and intent. Then, quietly, those same assurances evaporated once cameras stopped rolling. Narratives shifted, facts rearranged, private understandings contradicted publicly. Each time, Gayle's credibility took the hit. One media executive close to the situation put it brutally: Gayle felt used. Brought in to sanitize the story, then left exposed when Meghan's version changed to fit a newer, shinier narrative. That is unforgivable in elite media circles. And when Gayle King reached her limit, she didn't issue a press release. She issued something far deadlier: silence. A complete professional excommunication. No future interviews. No platform. No second chances. The bridge didn't just burn, it collapsed. And the damage doesn't stop there. Because Gayle King wasn't just another interviewer, she was the Sussex's last truly sympathetic mainstream ally. Her presence helped neutralize accusations of bias, hostility, and exaggeration. Without her, Meghan loses something far more valuable than airtime. She loses credibility currency. Worse still, King's assessment is now circulating quietly but rapidly among power players in New York and Los Angeles. The same criticisms once dismissed as anonymous bitterness from former staff now come with a heavyweight stamp of validation. When Gayle King reaches the same conclusions as Palisades and ex-employees, the narrative can no longer be waved away as racism or bad press. It becomes a pattern. And just as devastating as the professional fallout was what viewers noticed on screen, something no lighting directive could hide: the dynamic between Meghan and Prince Harry. Analysts, viewers, and communication experts who reviewed the interview described something chillingly consistent. Harry wasn't a partner, he was a prop. Whenever he tried to speak, he was interrupted. Whenever he offered perspective, it was overridden. Eye contact was fleeting, engagement was absent. One nonverbal communication expert described it as a masterclass in dominance, and not the flattering kind. Meghan positioned herself as the sole narrator, the only authority. Harry's role was to sit, nod, and fade. For a couple selling us against the world, the optics were brutal. Online, the reaction was swift and merciless. "She looks bored by him." That sentence spread like wildfire. Clips of interruptions looped endlessly, paired with captions questioning how a man who gave up his family, country, and identity could be treated like background furniture. The romantic epic collapsed into something colder, transactional, performative, hollow. And then came the second blow. When Meghan spoke uninterrupted, the audience didn't lean in. They tuned out. Critics described the monologues as rehearsed, overpolished, emotionally automated. The same grievances, the same buzzwords, the same victimhood, repackaged again. Within hours, one word dominated the conversation: boring. In the attention economy, that is a death sentence. The public didn't reject her angrily. They rejected her indifferently. and indifference is irreversible. The passion once sold as authenticity now felt corporate. The anecdotes felt recycled. The emotional cadence sounded programmed. People tuned in, expecting revelation. They got reruns. And this is where the collapse becomes undeniable. Gayle King's rejection wasn't just personal. It was institutional. The public's reaction wasn't cruel. It was fatigued. Together, they form a double verdict: elite media and mass audience rejecting the same thing for the same reason. Control. The same control that alienated a top journalist is the control that reduced a prince to a background figure and drained the story of life. In trying to dominate every frame, every word, every angle, Meghan lost control of the only thing that mattered: the plot. This is no longer a story about struggle, it's a story about overreach, and the silence from former allies is louder than any interview could ever be. And here's the part Meghan never calculated, the part no amount of scripting, lighting control, or narrative choreography can fix. Once the audience stops believing, the performance is over, because credibility doesn't collapse in one loud moment. It erodes quietly, piece by piece, ally by ally, until suddenly the room is empty and no one returns your calls. Gayle King walking away wasn't just rejection, it was containment, a firewall going up, a message sent quietly through private circles that the cost of association has exceeded the benefit. This is how elite media works, not with public denunciations, but with closed doors and vanished invitations. And that is the world Meghan is now entering. For years, the strategy was simple: bypass hostile press by using friendly platforms, lean on relationships, control the room, shape the questions, deliver a polished emotional arc, and exit with renewed sympathy. But that strategy depends on trust, and trust has a shelf life. When a journalist believes they are being brought in as a collaborator and later discovers they were used as a credibility prop, the response isn't anger, it's disengagement, and disengagement is lethal. Because once that label spreads, too controlling, facts shift, not worth the trouble, it becomes radioactive. Executives don't argue with it, producers don't challenge it, they simply move on, and that is already happening. The pool of journalists willing to submit to pre-approved questions, veto power, and post-production oversight has shrunk to almost nothing. Not because they fear backlash, but because the returns no longer justify the risk. The audience reaction sealed it. The interview didn't ignite conversation, it exhausted it. Social feeds didn't debate her claims, they mocked the repetition. Clips weren't shared in outrage, but in boredom. And boredom spreads faster than scandal. The most dangerous moment for any public figure isn't when critics attack, it's when people stop arguing altogether. That's what this interview revealed. And then there's Harry. Because the marginalization on screen wasn't accidental, it was structural. The interruptions, the redirected sentences, the subtle reclaiming of narrative space. It all pointed to one unmistakable truth: this was not a partnership presentation. It was a solo performance with a supporting figure. For viewers who once romanticized the sacrifice, the prince who left everything for love, the visual contradiction was jarring. If he is not an equal voice now, then what exactly was given up? That question lingered longer than any soundbite, and it fractured the foundational myth of the Sussex brand. Because the brand was never just Meghan's struggle, it was their love story, their unity, their defiance. Once that unity looks performative, the entire structure weakens. This is why the public reaction was colder than expected. People didn't rush to defend. They didn't rush to condemn. They simply disengaged. And that disengagement aligns perfectly with Gayle King's decision. One verdict from the inside, one verdict from the outside. Both saying the same thing: enough. The narrative has reached saturation. The grievances have been overplayed. The emotional currency has depreciated. And when that happens, even the most sympathetic platforms become liabilities. This is why the silence from former allies matters more than criticism from enemies. Silence means calculation. Silence means avoidance. Silence means you are no longer worth the friction. The irony is devastating. In seeking absolute control, Meghan lost the very thing she needed most: willing collaborators. The performance became so tightly managed that it stopped feeling human, so carefully curated that it lost spontaneity, so rehearsed that it lost credibility. And credibility cannot be manufactured. Gayle King understood that. Her withdrawal wasn't emotional, it was professional. A boundary drawn to protect her integrity, because integrity is her brand. And that's what makes this moment irreversible. Because once someone of her stature decides the cost is too high, others don't wait to test it themselves. They simply follow. This is how reputational collapse happens in real time, not with scandal, but with attrition. No headline needed, no confrontation required, just fewer calls, fewer invites, fewer platforms, until eventually there's nowhere left to speak. And that's the real consequence here. Not humiliation, not outrage, obsolescence. The audience has moved on, the media has recalculated, the story has stopped evolving. And when a story stops evolving, it dies. The final irony is this: the interview meant to restore control exposed the loss of it. The attempt to dominate the narrative revealed how little power remains to shape it. Because once the public senses manipulation instead of vulnerability, the emotional contract breaks. And it is broken, quietly, decisively, permanently. Gayle King didn't just cancel an interview, she canceled the illusion. And the silence that followed is louder than anything Meghan has said in years.